You might be wondering at this point about the connection between AI as a transformative technology and the discussion about the future of humanity. And so this week we're going to be talking about what's in between, what's been missing, which is exactly this idea of existential risk. And the first step is to distinguish between existential risk and the other kinds of risk that might be already present in the landscape of AI as a technology that could be very powerful, and as you have seen previously in the applications of large language models or LLMs. So it's very important to keep in mind that we will be talking about a different kind of risk that's not at the moment present in LLMs. LLMs are not capable enough to pose existential risk the moment that we're speaking. But some researchers think that the models that will come after LLMs or scaffolded versions of LLMs that might not be that far away from now could in fact pose existential risk. So that's the caveat to keep in mind, especially for next week where we'll be focusing on existential risk from AI. And so just to situate the notion of existential risk in our conversation about the future of humanity, first we distinguish between existential risk and the other risks posed by AI, but also risks that are not posed by AI, as you will read in the excerpt we have from the precipice. So existential risk is the kind of risk that could be the end of human existence, the end of humanity as a whole. And the other risks could be very harmful to humans, but do not necessarily mean the end of humanity. So that's the first definition to keep in mind. And we very often talk about other risks, and they are very serious, but they're not existential. Why? Because they do not threat human existence. They would not mean the end of humanity for good. And you might be wondering, how do we get to this idea of X risk, as it's called? We currently have an entire field of X risk studies, especially concerned with how these risks could be a threat to the future of humanity. And as you'll find in your reading for this week, the history of the idea of existential risk, before the Enlightenment, there is no concern of a possible end of humanity because of this principle of plenitude, which says that all legitimate possibilities are realized, so there can be no entirely unjustifiable absences in existence. In other words, no things that could have been, but simply just never are without any further justification. And that's sort of like the rationale behind not worrying about existential risk. But during the Enlightenment, one remarkable thing that happens is that we have all these new sciences. The science of the earth, like geosciences, geology, population science. We have more mathematical tools for studying probabilities, and also this idea of thinking in terms of reason and risk and responsibility for our actions, our humans. And so the idea that the end of humanity is a possibility becomes now quite prevalent, and different authors talk about it. And so keep in mind that it's historically a relatively new idea, the idea of existential risk, but it's nevertheless very important to understand how it comes together with a better understanding of nature and a better grasp of the different tools that we have for predicting the future. So, the three takeaways from this week, if we wanted to summarize them, would be: what is the definition of existential risk and how is it different from other kinds of risk? Why does thinking about existential risk in these terms come during a time of scientific thinking and reasoning about the world, which is the Enlightenment? And third, what's the connection between X risk and transformative technologies, as we will see next week, especially in the context of powerful AI systems?